Hi, friends. Happy Monday. Running a little bit behind my typical lunch hour start. So if you've been waiting for me, thank you for your patience. That's what I get for scheduling a new patient consult the hour before because I always end up talking longer and going over and connecting with all of you amazing people. So welcome to our episode of Learn with Flow this week. I'm really pumped to be back with you guys. I posted a reel this last weekend. If you saw it, it got lots of questions, lots of traction on it around, I teased the one treatment strategy that I use with all my clients that really helps move the needle, right? Specifically of all the things that maybe they've been struggling with for years, or they've gone from specialist to specialist around, and it's like one treatment, right? So it kind of gets buzzy, but it really is true that one of the major needle movers and the biggest treatment strategy that I always pride myself on starting with and really forming a strong foundation around is nutrition, right? And I saw a really amazing, another gal on social media post about really why is Western medicine or traditional medicine not talking about the power of nutrition, right? And the things that we're seeing from more of a functional nutrition practitioner approach that, is really intentionally different than more of the conventional medicine side of things. And that's because we have seen firsthand how a food forward foundation above anything else, sometimes just starting there, I have seen people spend years going to different neurologists for things like migraines when all they needed was more strategic carbohydrates. I've seen people get off of reflux medication and proton pump inhibitors and blood pressure medications just by correcting some meal timing. I've seen women who have gone to multiple endocrinologists who have been given thyroid medications when all they needed was to balance their blood sugar, right? And other women who have spent their life on birth control for period problems, when in reality they just needed to know how to nourish their body and they weren't taught how to do that, right? And other people going even in the mental health space, right? Going from therapist to therapist, trying different medication cocktails around anxiety or depression, and all they really needed was to correct some key nutrient deficiencies, right? I'm not saying that this is true for everybody in every situation, right? But it's a huge needle mover, and it's a really amazing tool in our toolbox if we know how to use it right, and the power of nutrition. Because when you're not meeting your body's basic nutrient energy needs, it's going to break down relatively quickly, right? It's one of those where it's definitely going to let you know. And all of the cells of our body require a consistent and predictable supply of nutrition, both macronutrients and micronutrients, to carry out everything from building hormones, managing detoxification and motility, energy production, and more, right? So it really amazes me sometimes how we have such a disconnect and a lack of awareness and education and resources to use nutrition as honestly our frontline foundational treatment strategy for people. It's like, do not pass go, do not collect $200. We need to focus on nutrition foundations first. I'm not saying that there's not going to be other things that will loop in or more things underneath the surface, but chances are we're not going to make forward progress on anything without a solid nutrition foundation. So it really amazes me how much Western medicine, not because of, like I said, that they don't have their own toolbox of tricks, but there's a really big gap in more of our traditional medicine model that really does lack a lot of the awareness and proper education on what nutrition even looks like, or its massive impact on health. And to me, it's arguably the greatest health treatment that we have with the best return on investment, right? Very little risk, very high reward and payoff. So it has to be kind of part of that low-hanging fruit. And I just like seeing such powerful transformations with clients, even in just the first 2 to 4 weeks of their treatment plan, by getting them a different system to think about food and getting them the foundational education on, hey, this is how your body thinks about food. I know what you've been told and taught from diet culture. I know what you've probably picked up from your parents or your caretakers. And this is what I'm telling you is like the science, that your body doesn't really care mentally how you think about it, but like this is how your body thinks about food. And once we start to work in alignment with that and kind of unite our understanding with our body, things start to go really, really well and things start to go really easily. So for all of my patients out there, this is going to be really helpful information for you to know of what does it actually look like for a practitioner or a provider to provide you nutrition education and nutritional counseling. And also for all my practitioners out there, this is going to really help you see, okay, am I aligning my practice and my clinical strategy with the key pillars to what it looks like to design the right nutrition plan for each patient, right? Or am I just coming in and giving everybody a cookie cutter blanket approach and not really taking into account each individual's patient need and not getting really great clinical outcomes, right? So for both the patient side of things and my practitioner side of things, I really wanted to spend today talking about my unique spin and lens on nutrition and how I think it's really, really important that we learn how to customize it for each individual and not just be that practitioner that just assumes that everybody's going to fall into the same cookie cutter meal plan that works for you, right? And I will say, practitioners, this is a little bit of a tough love call out, but also patients, this is what you'll kind of see too. Sometimes a practitioner can get jaded by what nutrition strategy has personally worked for them. It happens. It's a bias in the space, right? And they feel like they need to imprint everything that they do onto their patients, exactly how they do it, and everybody should eat this way. And it's like, can't work that way, right? So it's important that we remember and respect the fact that every individual's metabolism is really as unique as their own fingerprint. It's true, right? There's not one universal diet that's right for everyone, or even honestly, like top 5 diets for that matter, right? Look what we've learned over the last 2 decades of more and more diet information, and yet Americans are getting more and more metabolically unhealthy by the day. So we don't quite have it all figured out yet with our cookie cutter plans out there. And that's because there's not enough practitioners and providers that are willing to dig into the nuance, right? They just want a cookie cutter plan. Everybody's on the same thing because it feels black and white. It feels easier. And if it doesn't work for somebody, well, then you failed. It's not the diet's fault, right? And yet I find like more and more functional providers or even nutritionists or health coaches, we try to defy the fact that everybody is different, and we try to push our personal narrative onto patients, and we are desperately kind of try to fit everybody into the same box and think everybody needs to be gluten-free, everybody needs to be keto, everybody needs to be vegan, everybody's a vegetarian, everybody should practice intermittent fasting. And it's like, if you are a patient or a provider does this to you, please kindly peace out from that relationship, because as a patient, like I said, you deserve to be working with someone that's educating you on how your metabolism works. If you're a provider that's guilty of this, give yourself grace. Have an open mind and be willing to maybe learn a new way where your patient outcomes will really start to shine so much differently, and you'll find yourself with this more like endless referral base of people, more of a wait list of clients, right? It's going to go back to the clinical outcomes that you get for your patients and the experience that you provide for them. But we need to go about it understanding that everybody is unique in that way. So how in the world do we go about tailoring our approach to meet the individual needs of each person, right? I do say that this takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of confidence, and that's okay. That's something that can be cultivated and something that can be learned. And I've really had the invaluable experience to work with a broad patient base over the last 12 years of my career, right? All the way from athletes to diabetics to patients with chronic symptoms and autoimmune disease, right? And so through all of this experience, I've really come to develop a very unique lens and perspective that I've successfully shared and implemented with hundreds of people, right? And it allows for the customization to be built into the system, and also really, really helps individuals walk away with not just a physical strategy that works, but also a mental strategy that works. So welcome to the behind the scenes, sharing some insider secrets around the lowdown methods to be getting your patients the same type of results, right? We need some sort of system. We need some sort of pillars to be able to lean back on, right? So this is where Again, patients, you kind of can put yourself into the side of maybe different practitioners that you've worked with or different programs that you've participated in. For my practitioners, I'm kind of going to be talking to you, right? You're going to start to see, you're like, ooh, do I do that? Do I think about that with a patient? Do I take the patient through that type of experience, or do I just jump and skip all of those steps and go straight to a cookie cutter plan that I feel like everybody should be on and bypass all of their physical and mental needs, right? So I'm kind of speaking to you. I think this will be really, really helpful. So let's just jump right into it with pillar number one. So pillar number one, and these are all in a congruent order for this reason. So pillar number one of creating a custom and tailored nutrition plan to each individual person is going to be, I put it at number one for a reason. We have to start here, but it's arguably the most important too. And most people skip this. You have to meet the patient where they are at today. I'll explain. So a number of patients have come to me in the past with more of, like I said, a templated meal plan. Maybe it was just like a printout from a nutritionist. And the amount of people that have come with just that sole kind of piece of paper to me is absolutely mind-boggling, right? It's like, and usually conversations go something like this. They're like, yeah, I was given this meal plan, but I could only follow it a few days because it was like completely overwhelming to me. Or, yeah, the meals were just too complicated. They were too time consuming. Plus, I didn't even own half of the ingredients on this meal plan, right? Or maybe someone's like, I followed this meal plan to a T at home, but since my job makes me travel so much, I was just kind of guessing when I couldn't cook, and I didn't really notice a lot of change happening. I didn't really feel any different, right? So those are some of the conversations that I hear, and the very first thing that I would recommend, is not handing somebody a cookie cutter meal plan. You've skipped 5 different steps, right? The very first thing you need to know is, where is that client at today? Right? And I don't mean just always just asking a simple food recall, but I mean get into their life, right? Follow them on their shoulder for a week. What does a typical day in their life look like, right? I recommend collecting some sort of food log on every patient before you change or prescribe anything. Right? And this is because I've learned my lesson as a practitioner. Sometimes you insert some things that the patient can manage like a little too soon, or you kind of skip 5 steps and they actually start to feel worse, or you think that there's certain foods that are going to feel great and then they don't, right? So lots of different reasons for this. Trust me, I've learned, and I'm telling you, the most important part is try to hold your tongue from anything you feel like they should be doing, and let them know that, hey, I need to see a week's worth of data to be able to then make my most confident recommendations on what those first changes are going to be, right? Sometimes it can be hard because we want to jump the gun, but I'm telling you, collect the food log and force yourself to have the data in front of you before you change or prescribe anything. You might think the person is in one place. They might describe a typical day in the life as one thing, but then on paper, it actually looks very different than how they described it. And you're like, oh, if I would have known this, I would have maybe done it a little differently. So we need to, like I said, ride on their shoulder for at least a week is my preferred timeline. I really don't care what methods you use for this. You can have them do a food journal. You can use different food apps that are out there like MyFitnessPal, Chronometer. Those actually have a way to connect on the back end as a coach. So you can go in and you can actually see what they're logging. So that works sometimes if people like that system. I personally like a food photo system is something that I use. Doesn't matter, pick one. Pick a system that you like and works with most of your clients. Track at least 3 to 7 days worth of data before you say anything, right? To say anything about what you want them to change. So put yourself in their shoes, because what you're going to try to learn is, where do they grocery shop? How often do they eat at home versus outside the home? What foods are they already typically buying on rotation and cooking on rotation? What foods do they like, right? It's like, wow, what a novel idea. So wherever they are at right now is where you need to meet them. I don't care how far off that is from where you want them to be or where you envision them to be successful, but wherever they are now is where you need to go, right? And where you need to meet them. So very, very important, pillar number 1, you have to meet them where they're at. And in order to meet them where they're at, you have to know where they're at. So we need to collect some data. Hold your tongue on making any changes until you've seen the data. right? Which takes us to pillar number 2, very closely tied to this, but almost a little bit more into the deeper level. Like pillar number 1 is we need to see physically where they're at. Pillar number 2 is whatever you're going to change or recommend, you need to get in touch with their values, right? Ooh, this gets a little deep, right? But some of it just happens very intuitively. We as humans kind of pick up on some of this subconsciously. I'm just going to put some actual like words to it. So once we write around on their shoulder for a week and we have some data, now we can discuss what this looks like and also start to get into more of their emotional body and learn what is really important to them to be successful and to be consistent. So very similar to the first pillar, but instead of like the physical body, like where are they at now, from an emotional body perspective, what is important to them. I call these, some people call them get to know their values. I call it with the patient that I'm working with. I always call it, I'm like, let's really nail down your themes. What I mean by themes is what is important to them when it comes to food. Is it time, right? Is it convenience? Is it budget is really important to them? Is it the fact that it has to be family friendly, something that the whole family can enjoy? Is it important in terms of like where they're sourcing their food or the quality of food that they buy? How about like taste or texture? Maybe religious or ethical beliefs, right? So we have to nail down their themes, right? We have to get inside their emotional body, because I can tell you multiple different situations where I may want someone to execute a certain way, or I envision them executing a certain way, but it doesn't align to their values, right? So here's a typical example. Worked with a gal recently, getting her kind of kicked off on this nutrition mindset. And after I collect 7 days in the life, we got together and we were talking about it. And I was like, hey, I really want to nail down and identify some themes that are important to you. I get the sense that a very important one for you is time. She's like, yes, absolutely. It has to be quick. It has to be something that isn't super time consuming or super complicated. She's like, I get overwhelmed very, very easily, and I'm running my kids around, all of these different things, right? Of course, we're going to talk about her taking care of herself. But if that's where she's at right now and time is something really, really important to her, I am not going to recommend anything that causes her to have more than like 5 ingredients or one thing to microwave. Right? It's like we have to meet them where they're at, even if it's not where we ultimately want them to be. That's how we get them to where we ultimately want them to be, is understanding where they're at right now. And then something that I wasn't able to pick up from the pictures, but I happened to pick it up when talking to her, is she also said, she's like, I have a lot of sensory issues when it comes to food. If it's the wrong texture or it's kind of the wrong temperature, she's like, that's really hard for me, which is why it's been so hard integrating certain foods into my rotation, like vegetables, for example. She's like, I want to like vegetables. She's like, but I have a lot of taste and texture issues. If I didn't know that as a nutrition coach, we're already at a disconnect, right? Because I'm going to recommend things that she just straight up doesn't like. And she's either going to force herself to eat it, which is only going to last like maybe 3 to 5 days tops, not going to be successful long-term at all, right? So this is what I mean by establishing themes. It's like, it's like I say this and it seems kind of intuitive because I've been practicing it so often, but how many nutritionists, nutrition coaches, dietitians, health coaches are guilty of just handing somebody a cookie cutter meal plan that may violate every single one of their values? How bought in do you think that individual is going to be? How consistent do you think they're going to be? Will they see success? No. Right? They won't, right? And so you've already lost them, right? So sit down with the patient, review their food logs, and agree with them on like 2 to 3 major themes that are always accounted for. These are the filters that we're going to run things through. Which then takes us to pillar number 3, which is now, finally, at pillar number 3, we're ready to make some changes, right? It's like first we had to really get to know them, meet them where they're at. We had to establish what their values are. Now, pillar number 3, it's time to make some incremental changes. Whatever incremental changes you make, it has to come with a domino effect, right? That's so, so important. So going back to what you've learned about their current routines and compare it to where you ultimately want them to be. So point A is like, where are they at right now? What are their current habits, current beliefs, current routines, current level of knowledge? And then point Z is like, where do we want them to be? What are their future habits, future beliefs, future knowledge? And how is that shifted to help create measurable success for them, right? So the challenge then becomes learning how to close that gap from A to Z incrementally. It's not from A to Z. It's A to B, B to C, C to D, D to E, right? How do you do that incrementally? And again, this is something that's learned and cultivated over time. And it's really a unique skill that I like to teach other practitioners that are doing mentorship work with me, is how to discern what to change first and how much to change at one time. So how do you know where to start? Sometimes you just ask the following questions to yourself, right? What's the easiest thing for them to change that will provide the biggest domino effect? What is a small change that creates the most ripple effect is another way to think about it too. So here's some examples. These are like fake names, but let's say Stacy, 42-year-old mom of 3. She's currently skipping breakfast because she's just not waking up hungry. She's living off of energy drinks and wine and has a raging sweet tooth with binge eating patterns in the evening, right? The very first thing, start drinking a protein shake with your coffee. I know you don't wake up hungry, so you can't ask her to eat food, but can we drink something before the coffee? That's it. Don't touch anything else. That's it. How much domino effect will that create? I'm telling you, it's a lot because I've used that strategy a lot. Then that's point B. Now we can go from point B to point C, right? Or maybe Susan, who's a 60-year-old postmenopausal female with bloating, diarrhea, eczema. Very first thing, do I do this with everybody? No, but maybe the very first thing we need to do out with her is we need to pull out gluten right now until we dig into some more root causes, right? That can improve bloating maybe by 50%, and that can be really helpful for her. Do I do that with everybody? No, because I have to learn where she's at first and where her priorities are at. Maybe we take Craig. Craig's a 39-year-old male. He travels a ton for work, but only eats healthy when he's tracking his macros, right? The first step, he needs a new system because guess what? You travel a lot and macros, those do not coincide together. Your values don't match. You're not going to be able to do that with a high level of consistency. So he needs a new system to think about food differently as food categories, thinking about blood sugar balance, where he can see results even when he's eating outside the home, right? So these are just examples of like where you meet people where they're at, beginner, intermediate, advanced, and some people just getting them to drink enough water and grab something to eat outside the door that's not a donut is a huge win. And then we make those incremental domino effects, right? Which takes us then to pillar number 4, because as we make those incremental domino effects, it obviously has to give them therapeutic effectiveness to solve their metabolic issues. It's got to make some change, right? Whether that's body composition change, lowering cholesterol, resolving and putting autoimmune patterns into remission, helping them lower blood sugar markers, helping them clear their skin, resolve bloating, diarrhea, like whatever their ultimate goals are, like it obviously has to therapeutically align to those things too. So now that we have the foundation of the mental and the emotional, we can also start to consider all of the other things on the physical body perspective, right? So many practitioners, though, they try to skip to here first. They're like, where are you at? You need to solve your problems. Here's how you do it, right? And I'm like, that seems great on paper, but I'm telling you that there's so many steps that you missed, and those steps that you missed, you literally lost the person. Right? You either lost them mentally, emotionally, because you didn't connect to their values, or you lost them physically because you imparted so much change on them at once that there was no way that they were going to feasibly handle it. It was too much for already overwhelmed nervous system. So even if what you tell them is like sound science and you're like, but this is where they need to be. I'm like, no, I'm fully aware and agree that that's where they need to be eventually, but it doesn't mean that that's where they need to be to see success. Any amount of change, they're going to see success, right? So of course we have to customize and solve for things like mineral deficiencies, vitamin deficiencies, maintaining and managing blood sugar balance, managing their circadian rhythm and cortisol levels, lowering their toxic burden, optimizing gut microbiome health. It's like, yes, we need to do that, but that's part of the 4th phase of the pillar. We don't want to skip there, right? So some people may need some short-term nutrition approaches, some therapeutic approaches to really help with their metabolic condition, but the goal shouldn't be lifelong restriction or elimination, right? So you can't just skip straight to here. And knowing when and how to employ some of those strategies is key, especially when working with patients that may have a history of disordered eating tendencies, which, let's be real, is any woman under the age of 60 that grew up in diet culture, right? It probably has some disordered eating beliefs and thoughts and patterns, right? So I just always believe in a tailored approach for each patient. I want patients and providers both to know how to consider the symptoms in a broader sense, right? Of course, we're going to adjust to the physical body, but we also have to realize that this is a mental and emotional and a spiritual person in there as well too. And if we don't have methods and systems to appease to that almost first, then you're never going to get them the physical transformation. You have to be able to connect to them on a mental, emotional level. You have to be able to understand where they're at now, meet them where they're at in that place, and then help design the incremental changes over time. So to all my practitioners out there, if you found this helpful, I want to hear, and you want to hear like more practitioner facing content, hint, hint, I have more things coming down the pipeline. Feel free to comment below if you found this helpful, and I'll know that, like I said, more of this practitioner facing content is helpful for you guys. But in the meantime, remember the 4 pillars of designing a custom and tailored nutrition program, and you really can't go wrong. So have an amazing Monday and a great rest of the week, and we'll be back next week with more.